Audio log Friday, February 28th, 2025. Michael Cook speaking. It's currently 6:03 p.m. Making this audio log to talk about working on maps and stuff. I think that a video I made, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, where I recorded, my thoughts about the mapping process, and then, continued to screw around in the editor. I think that was pretty useful and probably entertaining and educational for some people. So I'm going to try to stick to the entire process that I've been working on over the last several months since I started working on Self-Destruction, which is one of the maps from Hell RA3 Map 1, map that I released in July of 2001. Kerberos is, I just updated Kerberos this week. And that is a map that is currently being played on White Lightning. Server admin Death Row has added like 4 of my maps to the server, but in each instance, there's other things that I've wanted to implement into those maps. I've just been kind of forcing myself to rush them to completion or what have you, and so that they could be played. But those maps are essentially all beta. Return to Castle Quake is the only map where I gave it a stamp of approval of being like totally finished. But even that map, I still have other ideas I'd like to implement. And so this idea of the map pack that I've been working on, 13 different maps, all of them original maps that I've made. They're not based on any existing maps that other authors have made. They're all iterations of maps that I made for Quake 3 Arena, or they're just something brand new. Goliath is a map that I've been working on over the last year and a half, I think. Sort of been playing with it, but I didn't work on it at all for about a year. Left that on the back burner, and then when I realized that it might be interesting for me to make videos of me using GTK Radiant or Net Radiant to do mapping and stuff, that's when I started to just make them more often. But in addition to making those types of videos, I also make the videos where I'm just playing the map, and then I didn't have a really great idea of how to go about this format when I first started, but it's something that I've been kind of figuring out as I go. I'll work on a map. I might record footage of me working on maps in the editor, and then typically I'll play music, but what tends to happen is I'll get like a copyright on it, unless a certain author is fine with me using it for fair use, but the last couple weeks I've been working on Dead Center. This week I worked on Kerberos, and then today I started working on Dead Center a little bit more and implementing some ideas that I had, like changing a lot of the square stuff to octagons, and then using the 3-point clipping tool to give it like a slope or whatever, and then using another technique that I showed off in the Space Station 1138 video, where I'll have a light shader at an angle, and then I will use a clip brush to make it more of a 90-degree angle, so that players don't have a difficult time when they meet that surface. They're not subjected to drag, which is pretty noticeable when you're in a firefight. I think that in the map Insane Products, a lot of the walkways that I implemented, there's certain lips or edges that players get stuck on, and it can be quite frustrating to hit those, and at some point I'm gonna go through and edit those in the map pack. When this map pack is done, I'm gonna have ideas that I've worked on in basically every other map, kind of crossed over into each individual map, so that they not only look good, but they play well, and that they're fun and enjoyable. Not every single map that I worked on hits all of those criteria, which is why I like to take my time in between working on each individual map. It's not like I'm working on these things every single day. sometimes I will work on stuff for like 6 to 8 hours a day, but I'll take a lot of breaks. You know, typically I'll be playing the game. You know, I like to play freeze tag. White Lightning is basically my go-to server, but I also play on Dark Fiber quite a lot, whether it's Atlanta or Chicago. You know, there's a lot of really good players on all of these servers, and you know, sometimes the servers are full, or sometimes I'm having a lot of network issues, or etc. and so forth, or maybe nobody's playing at all. And so in those instances, I'll start to think about, all right, why don't I start working on one of the maps? You know, I don't know. There's a weird set of criteria that causes me to be in the state of mind to want to work on this stuff. You know, I'm sure. You know, I made an audio recording recently where I talked about having a sense of discipline where, you know, even if I don't want to work on something, I'll force myself to do it. You know, I think that's good to have in some instances, but, you know, it's really like on one end of the spectrum, you're forcing yourself to do it, and then you're not enjoying what you're making, and then you start to work on stuff, and you might use a technique and put a lot of time into a certain technique, and then later on you realize, well, there's another technique that I want to use instead, and now I have to undo all the work that I did and then start over. You know, the work that I did on Kerberos this past week was basically, that's what I had to do, is go back and basically touch up every single part of that level. But, you know, when I pushed the video out of me playing it, I think that it paid off. You know, I think that people are really going to like the level of quality in each of these maps. You know, just today, Death Row added this map, Bloodrun _QC. I think it's the same guy that's made Awoken and Tension and Restless Exile. I really like Restless Exile. That is a really good map. But Tension is also really good. It just doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles in that concrete texture. It's kind of, I don't know, it's pretty bland. I remember making plenty of maps with just, you know, concrete textures, but it's really hard to pull that off. But anyway, what is it? Molten or Arabian Nights. That map is pretty cool too. It's kind of brush heavy, detail heavy, but I think that it hits certain criteria that you know, any map for, you know, free for all or freeze tag or even Clan Arena would want to hit all those checkboxes. You know, essentially it hits a benchmark or a level of quality, a consistency. That's really the word I'm looking for. It has a consistency between those maps. But this Bloodrun QC remake, I think the guy that made it put way too much detail into that map because it does not perform all that well. You know, we're talking like, I think it has like over in excess of 25,000 R speeds in some spots, if not more. And the map that I was working on last week, in many spots, the map is getting like 20,000 R speeds, which is kind of high. You know, a lot of people have machines that can play these maps just fine, and my newer laptop can render a map with 20,000 polygons or more a lot more easily than my older laptop. But it's still a pretty good idea to keep the R speeds low. And this allows anyone with older hardware to enjoy the maps as well. So like the original version of Bloodrun is relatively simple. I think that anyone who has played Quake Live has played Bloodrun. But ZTN made numerous other maps, like Beatbox. Beatbox is a pretty cool map as well, but I don't think that people really play that one all that often. Anyway, ZTN, I think he used to make maps for the original Quake 1, and some of those maps have been ported over to Quake 3 and Quake Live. But There's a signature for any map that was once made in Quake 1 that was ported over to Quake 3. You know, Airwalk is another example. I think Dismemberment is also a Quake 1 map. I'm not sure of that. But yeah, Dismemberment is good. Airwalk is good. Blood Run, really good. Beatbox is pretty good. Wish more people played that one. I think that would apply. I think that would play well in Freeze Tag and various other modes. So I'm sort of getting away from some of the things I wanted to talk about. Like Goliath is a brand new map. There's no base to it. It's something that I started working on after I made video game design part 1 back in August of 2023. And just the other night, I watched the entire thing all over again. And I think I had a pretty good thing going in that video, or everything that I edited together. You know, I was playing some of the maps in Team Arena, and the Team Arena has like a dual mode. And this is before I had a new copy of Quake Live for Steam. And everything in that video is kind of aged pretty well, actually. Some of the things that I said in that video weren't accurate because I was reading a document and trying to record audio and edit it into the video at the same time, and then try to record it all at 1080p so that, I don't know, a lot of criteria to meet. In that particular video, I talked about a lot of different maps, and essentially all of those maps that I talked about, there's a Quake Live version of that map. Like I talked about the Edge, Quake 2, Q2DM2, or Q2DM1. There is a version that is on Quake Live, and that map is really well made. And I think that translated to Quake 3 Arena really well, or Quake Live, I should say. But I played a lot of other versions of that map that didn't translate all that well. I played this one version of Tokei's Towers. I think it's 1-3 Tokei. You know, there's also 1-3 base, or maybe it's L3. I don't know. But anyway, there's also the Warehouse. There's a version of that map for Quake Live. But I think whoever made that map wasn't paying attention to their R speeds, and they just kind of added so much detail to this map that I don't know. There's a lot of things about that map that would make it more enjoyable if it were simpler. You know, that is a key theme in many of my maps. Is if I could start out by making a box, right, and then add a couple of items. But that's not going to be very fun. It's just a box. So then you have to start adding in different shapes and brushwork and angles, and in some cases curves, and you know the textures are going to help you figure out how to do that. It has to be kind of fun to navigate the level in order for people to want to play it, or to be enjoyable or strategic or what have you. And so you want to add a bunch of different shapes. You know, a lot of times I will use like 45-degree angles instead of a 90-degree angle for a corner in a room, or use it like an inside corner or an outside corner. So an inside corner is when there's two walls and then they meet at a 90-degree angle, and that's a 90-degree corner. One of the best techniques that I think I have been using is, instead of having a 90-degree corner, you have a 45-degree corner, and then it just looks more visually appealing. And that is something that I was implementing in Dead Center today. Dead Center. Adding those types of details make a map a lot more fun to play, but you don't really want to add those details and take away from the simplicity of the movement. You know, essentially, when someone's making a map, you want to focus on making it relatively fun to play. And then you start to carve away some of the brushwork that you've used to add details, but then you want to have clipping brushes to manage the way that the gameplay flows, so that it doesn't really take away from the original design of the map. The extra details are literally just there to be like eye candy. But then there's the outside 90-degree angle where it's the same brush, but it's 90 degrees at the edge, where you could you could bevel that with a 45-degree angle and then add a different texture on that edge. A lot of times I will try to take multiple brushes and then merge them together, because that helps the game engine to reduce the number of polygons that it has to render. And curves are really useful, but they add a lot of geometry or triangles every time they use a curve. And even like really small brushes, even if they are really small, they still have a number of polygons to render that. And then sometimes what I'll do is I'll make a clip brush. I'll have a brush that's textured with the clip texture or shader, common/clip, and then I will shape it accordingly. And then I'll do what I did in Dead Center, where I sort of use like 45-degree approximations, or I was experimenting this week with making like curves with straight up brushwork. I made an audio recording talking about that, but I don't really think that's a useful technique in all instances. It's incredibly difficult to pull that off while maintaining alignment with the grid, and to have each face of the brush matching up with the grid to some extent. You want to keep the textures aligned with the grid as well as the brushwork aligned with the grid, because anytime that you make changes to the brushwork, you want the textures to match up. You can it's not even theoretical, you can make a brush that doesn't align with the grid at all, but that is a pain in the ass to get other brushes to match up or line up with that particular brushwork. And I think that's where curves are pretty useful in a lot of cases. But in Kerberos, there's a number of these curves that I use that aren't real curves. They're simulated curves, where I used multiple curves to give myself a template to work with, and then I started dragging and dropping actual brushes, and then where those curved surfaces are, and then I use the clipping tool to make them match up with the curve to some extent, or at least approximate them somewhat, and then getting the angles to all match up at the same point that a curve would match up. So at some point I will probably demonstrate how the brushwork that I use in Kerberos does that. You can see in the earlier versions of Kerberos where the staircases, the spiral staircases that I use to go around like the purple pylons, each of those stairs hugs this, I don't even really think it's an octagon. I think it's like a, I don't remember how many faces I've got on in those spiral staircases, but those staircases were all clipped with the clipping tool, and then I added like a border brush around the lips of those spiral staircases. And it's really difficult for me to explain this while there's so many cars driving around, and I don't have the tool in front of me. So it's going to make it a bit more challenging for me to talk about the specific techniques without showing an example. So I have to think ahead. What am I going to showcase as I potentially use this audio recording to demonstrate what I'm talking about? Well, in Kerberos, there's a number of surfaces that look like they're curves, but they're not curves. They're actual brushwork. And there's strengths and weaknesses to creating brushwork that emulates the curves versus using actual curves. But the one thing that I dislike about using curves the most is that oftentimes they don't meet up at the seams. And I think Trench Broom has some tools that allow somebody to make better use of the curved surfaces and to texture them more appropriately. You know, this link to Bell's map techniques on Slipseer, I think that's what it is. That's pretty useful. But yeah, I don't know. One thing that I've learned is that I should develop something with a tool that I'm most comfortable with, and then for aspects of development, I can use other tools that I'm not as familiar with, and then you know, play around at that point. And then maybe like in 6 months, I might wind up using Trench Broom a lot more, and then you know, at some point, maybe I'll stop using that Radiant or GTK Radiant and then only use Trench Broom if it's, you know, applicable to Quake Live maps. But yeah, I don't know. If I start chasing down like every single individual program that I'd like to have more exposure with, it'll take me 10 times longer to get this map pack done. Whereas if I focus on the things that I know how to do and that I can do, then I'm managing my time more wisely. And then, you know, that's something that I learned when I was programming quite a lot, spending thousands of hours working on functions in PowerShell, and then eventually creating a module, you know, the script fighting entropy. There's a script that has a bunch of classes that throw the PSM file together, and then you know, it validates every single individual file that it downloads with a hash value, and if the hashes don't match up, then it retrieves a newer version of the file from my GitHub repository. You know, I kind of want to get back to finishing that because at some point I'm going to wind up being done with this map pack, and then I'm going to start doing a lot more stuff with virtualization, programming. And, you know, despite the amount of generative AI stuff that's out there, I still think that there's a practical use case scenario for my programming work and how to deploy virtual machines with specific templates, security configurations, and network configurations. You know, a lot of people don't realize this. I'm a design artist, system engineer, and application developer. So I have a lot of expertise with networking and security, but also graphic design and, you know, 3D modeling and video editing and things like that. The number of skills that I have is pretty vast, and, you know, a lot of times I leave stuff on the back burner because I get stressed out from having to work on it so much. So really want to talk about the work that I did the last week or two. So I worked on Goliath quite a bit, and I've got alpha version 2, version 0.2 up, and I'm letting a little bit of time go by before I start working on that again, because I kind of want to work on other maps like Kerberos, get that sort of more done, which I managed to do that this week. Get Dead Center a little bit more done. Managed to do a fair amount of stuff just in the last hour and a half, and I have more ideas that I'm going to implement. And then, you know, at some point tomorrow, I'll have a video of either me working on Dead Center or me just playing the newer version, which I think it'll be beta version 5 and 0.5. And I got to get a lot of my other maps up to like a beta 0.5 before I start having people beta test the maps. And so as I work on some of these newer maps, I come up with this style, or I have a eureka moment. Eureka, or I don't know how to say that word. I'm having a brain fart. Having like a revelation, and that's sort of what I did when I was working on Goliath. A lot of these grates that I use in Goliath have like an edge pattern or edge brush. You know, it's started out with a clip brush and then angled it the same way that I did with the brushwork in Space Station 1138. And then I started sectioning off portions of that clip brush, splitting them, and then splitting them even more so that it had this visual of a catwalk or something. And then I added a bunch of like railings, and then added a lot of 45-degree angles and corners and stuff throughout the map. And then, you know, I got to the point where I was doing a little bit more than just 45-degree angles. I was doing like 60-degree angles or 30-degree angles, and then trying to get the brushwork to line up with that. And then, you know, once you start doing that, you really kind of have to get creative with how you manage to get all this brushwork to align with the grid, and then to get the shader, the texture, the light shaders and stuff like that to you know, look good on particular surfaces. You know, I think using the shaders as a light source is a really good first choice, but at some point you do want to throw in some light entities to get certain areas that are a little bit darker to be more visible. You know, there's plenty of maps out there that they look really good, but the lighting isn't all that great. And I think this BloodRun_QC map has that issue in some spots, in addition to just having way too much geometry going on. There's portions of that map that, I don't know, it was tanking my frames per second quite a lot. And if a map is doing that, then on my system, then no doubt that is happening on other people's systems as well. And that is what people were saying. You know, to take a map like Blood Run and to make it run like shit is quite a feat. You know, like, I don't want to say that the guy that worked on that map did a lousy job, but definitely some room for improvement. If the map isn't, if they're running efficiently, then the people are gonna have issues playing it. So that said, working on Goliath, I started implementing some of this catwalk stuff, and then I was like, well, I could apply that to Dead Center, and then, you know, make the square board brushes around the jump pads octagon, and then, you know, that'll blend in more nicely. And so far it does look really good, but then I have to continue working on it and make it, you know, playable. And then I think me and my buddy are gonna play these maps over the weekend. Maybe not. I don't know. Depends on whether or not I manage to get Dead Center and maybe another map done. But you see, like, even though I have all these maps to work on, like, I don't want to work on them every day. Sometimes I'll wait like several days to start working on something again, and then it's sort of the process, kind of taking a long time to do all this. You know, for each individual map that I've worked on, I've made probably like 5 or 6 videos at least, and you know, that's a lot of videos just to document all of the maps that I've been working on. There's a lot involved in doing this, but like I said, simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication. You don't want to get too heavy-handed with making something simple complicated, and I think this guy that made Blood Run QC did that. There's a bunch of other Quake Champions D-makes to Quake Live that are, far above average. Like Restless Exile is a perfect example of a map that was, made from Quake Champions into Quake Live. I think that is a perfect example of a map that is simple and really fun to play, and it's pretty fun to play that map. It's a dual map, but it's also pretty good in freeze tag. I would imagine that it's pretty good in Clan Arena, though I haven't played it on a Clan Arena server. And free for all. And a really good map is going to hit all of that criteria. But the thing about Restless Exile is that you're not going to want to play a map like that when you have 20 people on a server. I think some maps they play better when they're fully loaded like that. But some maps are just like you spawn and you're already dead, and that's not fun. I know that there's plenty of players out there that don't mind spawn killing to no end, but that's not very fair, and it's not fun for other players. So you have to be considerate of the number of players for any particular level. And this was a thing when I was reviewing levels for LVL World. You would say, all right, I think 8 players would be good for this map, 8 to 16 players for that map, 16 to 32 players for this other map. You keep into consideration. You have to consider all of that as you're making each map. Like, what is the maximum number of people that are going to be able to play this map and it'll still be enjoyable? So, in the case of Goliath, I added like 64 spawn points because the map is pretty large. I really don't think that people are going to duel on it, and I don't expect them to because of how large it is. But something like Return to Castle Quake that can be played in dual mode, which is why if anyone does play the dual version, they'll notice that the dual version of the map is slightly different than the freeze tag or the free-for-all or Clan Arena versions. Like in the dual version, you can't leave the inside of the castle, whereas in freeze tag, you're free to walk around outside and grab other items and armor, health, or power-ups. In the dual version, you're not able to do any of that. You're stuck inside of the castle, just like in the original version of Return to Castle Quake that I released in 2002. Pretty close. There's a lot of things that I changed about that map, but a lot of people tell me that the map is pretty good, and that says a lot about something that I make that I enjoy playing. I might have a sense of bias about it, but if I realize that other people share the opinion that I have about something that I enjoyed making and playing, then I know I did a really good job. And I feel as if it's important to hit that criteria and straying from that criteria, you're going to have undesirable attributes or properties to any particular map when you forget about core concepts or key concepts. So anyway, I think that's going to do it for this particular audio log. I am going to go continue working on Dead Center. And then, I don't know. There's really not a whole lot that I'm going to change about it tonight. Probably tomorrow. If I don't finish it tonight, I'll probably work on it a little bit tomorrow. But, we'll see. See how it goes. End log. Audio log Friday, February 28th, 2025. Michael Cook speaking. It's currently 10:29 p.m. Making this audio log is an extension to the one that I recorded earlier. I went ahead and did a couple hours of work on Dead Center. I'm going to likely finish doing a bunch of stuff tomorrow. I think I'm going to play these audio recordings in tandem of working on it. And at some point I'll make a video just playing around on it. So I came up with some ideas, and it's just not anytime that I'm just using the laptop, it's a little bit more difficult for me to edit the maps, so I need to wait till I gotta have the extra monitor on hand. And so I'll be doing that tomorrow. Any extra screen real estate is useful when working on these things, but that doesn't mean that I can't implement some other ideas or start doing other cool stuff. So came up with a bunch of little ideas that I'm gonna finish tomorrow. And then yeah, I don't know, I was thinking about how I spent a fair amount of time playing this game many years ago, making maps and stuff, and met a lot of people along the way. And I ran into this dude, Demix. Demix was once my protege in the clan Hell. So I talk a lot about Hell RA3 Map 1. There were several people, several clanmates in this clan that I started, Hell. And Demix has turned out to be like insanely good at the game. There's a lot of really good players in Quake Live. It is definitely not an easy game to master. But what I've noticed is that a lot of the better players, they have a really advanced setup where they're running like something above like 144 hertz monitor, 240, 250 frames per second. And I can tell when the players that I'm having trouble against have those faster, snappier setups. It's really hard to characterize how and why. I know when they're running a much faster setup than I'm using. You know, I'm just using like a $100 laptop to play the game, and my older laptop is from like 2009. This newer one I got is from 2018, so seems to run the game pretty well. I don't need anything really extra fancy special to run the game or to make maps for it. At some point I envision myself being done with this map pack and getting back to like doing programming and virtualization type stuff, and you know, maybe you know, finishing this map pack will open some opportunities to where I can focus on more of that. You know, playing with some of these guys, thinking about some of the friends that I had along the way. Went to high school with a couple of friends that were in Hell with me. My friend Alex Welsh used to be Zero Cool, now he's Azak the Butcher, and he plays on Dark Fiber quite a lot. Another guy used to be in the clan who works at Microsoft now, or I don't know if he still works there, David Bishop. And then there was this guy in the clan named Orion, and I think he is Storm Shadow. Storm Shadow made a bunch of maps for Quake Live. Devilish, well, he made most of these maps for Quake 3 Arena before making them, porting them over to Quake Live. Devilish, Cajun Hell, there's this one, I can't remember the name of it. Gloom is one of the maps. I think Gloom uses the same texture set as Return to Castle Quake. And I remember his first map, his very first Quake 3 map. It was very simple, and I remember playing that, and then he eventually came up with this other one. I think it was, I don't know, it's got this texture, it says like 1337, I think, or I don't know, I think it's inspired by George Orwell's 1984, some of those textures, but yeah, I can't even really describe it without sounding like really vague about it. But yeah, Storm Shadow has made a number of maps, Refinery, and satanic and devilish. I haven't really gotten into satanic all that much, but I loaded it up not that long ago when I found out that like he had made it. Probably made some other ones that I haven't tried yet, but Storm Shadow did a lot with his map portfolio. Maybe he went on to work for like Treyarch or I don't know what's the company that made Wolfenstein: The New Colossus and the Old Blood or the New Blood or whatever. Maybe he went on to work for them, making way cool maps, doing way cool shit because he's Storm Shadow. I think it was a reference to the dude from G.I. Joe, or maybe the actual weapon Storm Shadow. I don't know. Well, I'm pretty sure he was Orion at one point. And then there are a few other guys, but I can't remember their names or remember much from that long ago. I mean, we're talking like literally 25 years ago. Yeah, I remember when Rocket Arena 3 first came out. I was in 9th grade, I think. It was 1999 was when I started 9th grade at the end of the year. And then, it was at some point before the school year in 2000, before that started. Or at or about the time that the school year started. Or maybe it was around the time that it ended. But I don't know, I spent a lot of time playing Rocket Arena 3, and a lot of the maps in Quake Live are Rocket Arena 3 maps. You know, Theater of Pain, Evolution, Canned Heat, Thunderstruck, Henhouse, Drunken Mummy. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool maps in Rocket Arena 3. I think Charron had his own RA3 map too. Yeah, I was thinking about Charron because this dude, Cyberdyne Systems Model 101, is Praja Paramita. That's his old name. He's like, you need to make a cool version of Charron 3DM13 or else you're stupid. Now, he didn't say it like that, but you know, I like to paraphrase what people are saying sometimes to make it more comedic or entertaining. You know, I was thinking like, somebody somewhere is probably thinking, wow, this BFG 20K dude used to have a website on Planet Quake, making maps and stuff, and he never updated his maps to Quake Live. Wow. What a loser. He should have done that like 10 years ago. You know, no one's ever actually said that to me, but, you know, sometimes I will, like, play around with, like, perspectives. Sometimes I'll think, like, you know, I'll be playing somebody and they'd be like, you know what, BFG 20K, you suck, and your maps suck, and this is bullshit, you know. Sometimes people, they get very competitive in this game. But eventually after you play certain people after a while, you come to terms with the fact they're either really good or they need improvement. And then, it's very hard to put into words. And everybody has a different skill level, and nobody ever stays at the same skill level forever. Right, like you need to put into the game in order to remain good at it, whether it's Quake Live or some other game. You have to have some practice with your hand and eye coordination, and having a much faster system helps. You know, Proj has like an insanely beastly setup. So does Alex Azek the Butcher. He's got a pretty decent setup, and these guys don't play like Azek's not quite on Cyberdyne's level, but he throws down the gauntlet from time to time. You know, he's one of my best friends from high school, and we didn't talk for a really long time. wound up dating this girl that was my neighbor for a while, and moved down to Texas, and that's where he's been living there for a while. But yeah, I don't know. We didn't talk for like 10 years or so. We started talking after I got hit by a car in October 2023, and I needed surgery on the arm. And what better therapy than to, after the surgery, just kind of constantly move my hand around. I have like 95% mobility with my left arm compared to what I once had. But, playing the game is definitely good for my hands, or at least, this one hand that was injured. Not my hand, but my arm. And, yeah, so I really enjoy mapping. I like to think about it for a while, and then sometimes I'll go to sleep and I'll dream of like ideas. I mean, that's kind of rare, but I'll think of ideas as time goes by. It's not something that tends to happen when I'm forcing myself to do it. And once I started working on Dead Center again, or Kerberos earlier this week, or Goliath last week, I come up with ways to shape or the architecture of the maps. So I just uploaded a video of Kerberos the other night, and I made a lot of changes to that map, but most of them are so subtle that people probably won't notice the difference. But there are some drastic changes, like there's no wall near the green armor anymore. I upscaled the dirt texture on the ground, which I'm going to reproduce in the other maps. I really like to use the dirt textures a lot, in addition to other floor textures, because I don't know, it just kind of gives it an organic look. And out of my head, I used the snow textures. Out of my head, I was working on that like last month. And when I leave some of these ideas on the back burner for a while, then I work on some other map, and then I come up with an idea or a new style or technique that I can replicate in another map that I want to update somehow. Tranquilibrium, which used to be Tranquil Equilibrium, is a map that I was working on back in December. And then also Wisdom, another map from Hell RA3 Map 1 that I started working on in December. I think I might have updated it a couple times in January, but it's been on the back burner for a while. And not really sure what the hell I want to do with that level to make it better. But I know that as I work on each map, and I let it sit around for a while, and then I play the game some more, or like play some other maps, I'll get some ideas from sampling what else is out there. I talked about this map, BloodRun_QC, earlier in the prior audio recording, and I noticed that he's using a similar, like the texture that I used from HFX Evil's texture pack. I think he modified it to be like a doubled, I don't know. I modify a lot of the textures too, but I saw that. I was like, there's a chance that the guy saw some of my content or maps, and he was like, hey, you know what, I could use that texture too, dude. So I'm gonna, or maybe it just happened by chance. I don't really know. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool details in that BloodRun_QC map. But like I said, it's just kind of taxing on the system, and a lot of other people were saying that it wasn't running all that great on their system too. I think there's more geometry in that map than corrosion in some spots. And it's very important to be considerate of R speeds. It's also important to be considerate of how curves, they do not stop the viz process from processing what's behind them. You know, curves are not quite the same as brushes. You know, there's a curve in front of you, you're going to be able, the game engine has to render what's behind the curve. So that's one reason I don't entirely like using curves in every single direction, but I will use them in a lot of cases. Now, I recorded an audio recording the other night talking about using curves and trying to get the patches to merge together, or not merge. Well, yeah, actually, to get them to merge. Because sometimes when you're working with curves, even if they have the same sort of edges, like in the editor, when you get into the game, well, even in the editor, you can see this. There will be a gap between one patch mesh and another. And there are certain ways you can get them to merge together, but I don't know how to apply different textures to a merged patch mesh. You know, it's relatively new to me. And that causes me to experiment with using brushwork to emulate the curves. So a lot of people probably don't know what that means. I did try to talk about this earlier in the other audio recording, but I don't think I explained it well enough. Let's say I have a 90-degree bevel. Well, if I have a 90-degree bevel and it's a certain size, right, and then I want to have a border brush, I want there to be a width of like 16. You could use the thicken curve feature in GTK Radiant. You can't use that in Net Radiant because for whatever reason that option isn't there. But you could use a thicken curve in GTK Radiant, and that'll thicken it by whatever units you want to thicken it by. But the problem with that approach is if you want to add a cap, or like if I make a bevel that's a 90-degree curve, and then I go to curve and then cap selection, it'll give you 5 options. The first option I think is a regular bevel, and then it's a regular end cap, and then it's an inverted bevel and an inverted end cap, and then there's a cylinder. For whatever reason, there's no inverted cylinder, which is kind of dumb. There should be that option, and that alone causes me to have to split a lot of the cylinders into 2 different end caps that are, you know, equivalently shaped or whatever, and then use the cap selection for that. But there's no way to get a curve to do basically the same thing that you can do in AutoCAD, where you can select a edge of a particular shape or brush or model, and then you can extrude it. And as far as I know, there's no way to do that in Radiant. You can do that in a modeling editor, I believe. And I have shied away from using modeling editors because that is incredibly time consuming. You know, depending on the complexity of the type of models you want to make, you know, you could very well make a model that is the size of an entire level. And I think that is the approach that they started using in like Rage or Doom 2016. You know, they'll have a lot of brushwork, but then they'll mix it in with this mega texture idea. The mega texture is something that John Carmack implemented in Rage. I think that was the first game that utilized the technology, and it was pretty buggy at first, and a lot of graphics cards had problems running Rage at launch, but eventually there were some patches released and then it started to work okay. Like, you would be looking in one direction and then you'd move your mouse in another direction, like 90 degrees, and then the textures would be really bland and then they would suddenly pop in. Yeah, that was a pretty serious issue when Rage first launched, but I think they sort of worked the bugs out with that. Now, you could make an entire model Um, and then this idea of the mega texture is like a very, very, very high resolution texture that's mapped to the model. The model takes plenty of time to make, but that is not what is consisting of the most space. What causes the asset to take up far more space is the texture that's applied to that model. And that is why modeling takes a really long time to do well, depending on the complexity of what you're making. Now, when it comes to making the maps, you don't have to be super granular, but you can be. And I think it's a process that takes a while. If you want to get super granular about making maps, or very fine-tuning a whole bunch of details, you want to let the asset mature after a while, which is sort of what the approach that I've been taking. You play it for a little bit, you get it so that it's fun to play and fun to navigate around, but then you start to add the details, fine-tuning the details and stuff. And then, you want to be considerate of the scale of the map at all times. If you start implementing very small details early on, then you're going to wind up building the level around that. And, that approach might work in some cases, but it's not always going to work. And then you're always going to have to tweak the size or the scale of the assets that you've already implemented. Or, in many cases, I'll just, when I was programming a lot, I would constantly rewrite what I was working on. Not entirely from the ground up, but let's say being able to parse through an HTML file. Well, there's multiple ways you can do it. It'll typically resolve to using regular expressions and looking for keywords and phrases and stuff, but you really want to take each element of the HTML and make it its own object. So anytime that there's a script block within the HTML, you're going to want to parse that out and then parse it further once you've parsed it out. And then cascading style sheets, you're going to want to parse that out separately, and then eventually you get to the point where you can parse the HTML and then sort them into objects. But the way the language is coded, it does that automatically, so you don't really have to think about doing all of that. But as an exercise, I would think of ways to do that anyway, or being able to convert a chunk of XAML into a PowerShell drive, so that the hierarchy of a given chunk of XAML, I could navigate it like a PS drive, things like that, and then recursively find stuff or child elements and things of that nature. Even managing IIS that has child elements in the configuration scripts and stuff. And then I got a lot of exposure with this stuff by working on the Friends of MDT PowerShell deployment, which was originally part of Michael Nyhaus's GitHub project, PSD Master. And eventually I reached out to him, and he told me that it was on the Friends of MDT GitHub now, and I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, cool. I've had a couple of interactions with Johan Arwoodmark regarding the ZTI gather.xml. Early on, I didn't really know what the hell I was doing with the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. Well, I did know what I was doing in that respect, but I wanted to do more with PowerShell. Once I started coding with PowerShell, I was kind of hooked. And, eventually, after a few years of pounding onto the keyboard, I managed to learn quite a lot about PowerShell, but now it's kind of a useful skill that I keep on the back burner. I'm not constantly rewriting stuff like I used to. But anyway, yeah, I mean, the same concept applies to graphics editing, video editing, drafting and design, system management, network engineering, security engineering, group policy, objects, Active Directory, domain services, certificates. In order to understand certificates, you really have to know a lot about how the operating system works and how domains resolve to IP addresses and firewalls and ports, port filtering, being able to use a gateway or some sort of virtual private network, or what the hell is there's some technologies that come out of the box when you install a Windows Server. I think it's CMAK, some sort of remote administrative service or something. Allows you to use something that's similar to a VPN. A lot of this stuff can be managed with PowerShell, and you don't have to write with PowerShell to do any of this stuff, but it definitely makes one's life easier. And then I know I'm kind of like tangenting from this idea of making maps for Quake Live or whatever, but yeah, I think kind of talking about a lot of my experience helps to talk about how all these elements blend together. What are the similarities or parallels? A lot of people, they get lost in specifics, but sometimes when you offer like analogies or some sort of parallel, it helps some people make more sense of what's being discussed. And in a lot of cases, I'll start to go on a lot of tangents and forget what I was originally talking about. But I don't know, some people will say that someone who does that a lot is not very focused. No, they're not very focused. They need to have a list of bullet points to discuss, and central core focus of their discussion needs to be about those specific things. So if you're not doing that, then you're dumb. Like someone probably will try to say something like that, but regardless, yeah, there's a lot that's involved in these maps. I'm not just using GTK Radiant or Net Radiant to make these maps. I'm also manipulating images with Photoshop / GIMP, and writing stuff with the shader syntax. I took a real deep dive into the Quake 3 Arena shader manual, and started coming up with a document that talks about individual components of each shader, and like sort of wanted to delve into expanding on a lot of that stuff. But I figured if I had some examples of how certain shaders work, because that shader manual doesn't have a heck of a lot of examples. It's got some examples, but the way that it was formatted, I think some of the examples were broken, particularly one line about Q3 map sun. You're supposed to have 3 floats, normalized floats between 0 and 1, and then elevation and attitude or something, and I guess intensity. So you need a bunch of parameters to go with that, and the way that it was formatted was shoving one of the numbers right against the command Q3 map sun. you know, and screwing around with shaders, it's pretty time consuming. Screwing around with PowerShell is pretty time consuming. Screwing around with map editing and graphics editing is pretty time consuming. You know, this movement with generative AI definitely helps people that don't have a lot of exposure to all of it, but it's not going to teach everybody about every single aspect of what these tools do, and it's not going to be able to produce a practical example of how reading something like a Quake 3 Arena script shader manual, you know, how to layer certain shaders on top of images with alpha mask or alpha channels. You know, it's going to have 24-bit colors, which will be, you know, red, green, and blue, and then there will be another 8-bit channel for the alpha channel, which will have layering degrees of transparency. You know, that's all pretty important. If you want to have a shader that casts shadows, like there's a lot of maps where the sky or some sort of light is shining through something that has an alpha mask, like let's say it's a metal screen or something like that, and then once the light passes through that particular shader, then it will create a shadow on the other side of the room or whatever, and that's pretty difficult to explain to people unless you have an example of how that works. You know, bloodrun_QC has this one curved room that has what I just described, and then there's also this other map like Dead Souls has that, like on the floor, and underneath the floor there's like some light that shines up and then casts a shadow of like a grid, the texture that you're walking on, and casts it onto the ceiling. There's a lot of maps that have that, and then there's this one map, Windsong Keep, where there's like colored stained glass, and it creates a shadow that you know, emulates the colors of the stained glass, and I think that is pretty cool. But I don't see a lot of maps using that technique. I'm sure I could figure out how to do it since that level does it. But you know, I don't like to directly like take an idea from some other map and then implement it into my own. I like to create my own original maps and think of ways to improve them, refine them a little bit. You know, having a lot of reviews on LVL World. I remember I wanted somebody to review some of the maps that I had made. There was a really long queue of maps ahead of mine. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to review other people's maps and stuff. You know, and then I don't know how many reviews I submitted, but, you know, I would write a lot of stuff like I'm talking right now. Maybe not like in the same amount of depth that I'm putting in this audio recording, but, you know, I would be considerate of all those aspects of what makes a map great. You know, the item layout or the item placement, and you know, where health and armor is located, and how well you can navigate the map without, you know, sometimes there'd be a map that looks really cool and plays kind of well, but there's a lot of areas where someone could get snagged. And I think Toxicity is a great example of that. Toxicity is a map that looks really great, and it is pretty small. A lot of people play that on dual mode, but I see it played a lot in free-for-all as well. But there are a lot of places to get snagged on that map. You know, if you're developing a level for a game like Quake 3 Arena or Quake Live, you want to eliminate as many potential ways to be snagged on the brushwork as possible, which is why clipping is really important, but also, you know, shaping the brushwork so that, you know, I was working on Dead Center earlier, and I was thinking about how many places I get snagged when playing some of the bots when I'm testing it. and thinking of ways to make those snags a little bit less noticeable or non-existent. So instead of having like a 90-degree corner, I'll have like a 45-degree corner, or then I could make it even more complex and have like a 30-degree corner and a 30-degree corner and another 30-degree corner, so that it's split into three. But finding a way to get that to match with the grid is a pain in the ass. Or if you want to split it 4 ways and you have 22.5 degree corners, 4 of those adds up to 90. That's also a pain in the ass if you want to have like a border brush. It's not such a pain in the ass for using curves to do that, but if you want to use brushwork, it will be. And then if you want to resize it or change its thickness or dimensions and then have the textures line up with it, you might think that something that simple couldn't be that complicated, but it is, or it can be. And that's why curves make map making a lot easier. But like I said, the game engine sees right through curves, so you're not going to be able to use them like to partition portions of the level. I think that is an issue with this map Blood Run QC. I think it is rendering basically the entire level from like the area where the red armor is, and you're looking towards where the mega health is. There's a lot of cool ideas in that level. There's a jump pad and like a thicker hallway where the portal goes up to the between the red armor and the quad damage. And then there's also like a 90-degree stairs, like between where the quad is and the yellow armor is right next to the quad. Now, I think like whoever made that level has a lot of really cool ideas. I'm not going to try to take away from that, but you can implement ideas that are really cool and make the map like very efficient and run fast. And I think that whoever's been making these maps kind of forgot like how Restless Exile performs really well and Tension performs really well, but then like Arabian Nights doesn't perform as well. And then the Blood Run QC it doesn't run that well at all. I would say it runs worse than Corrosion does. Like if you have a high-end computer like Cyberdyne Systems Model 101, you're not going to give a flying fuck because your computer is going to run it at 250 frames per second and you're not going to notice a single problem. But for a lot of players, they're not going to have like a top-of-the-line system. They're going to have like, probably a budget system or some sort of business laptop or whatever. The game is old and a lot of people play it because it's old, so you have to be considerate of like people that don't have like thousands of dollars to throw around on a particular device. If you want to buy like a GTX 5090, you're gonna have to worry about it shorting out, and that's gonna cost you like $1,000, and then they're gonna RMA it because I don't know, like seen a lot of videos about these new 5090s or 5080s shorting out because of the way that the power supply, one of the power rails is melting the connector, and then that's not a good look for NVIDIA when someone buys an expensive ass brand new GPU and then it shorts out. Like they're not the only company that's made products that were flawed or crap out of the box. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really want to spend too much time talking about brand new hardware that has problems. I really just want to focus on some of the maps that I've been working on, and maybe provide some insight for other people. Right before I got hit by a car and my arm was broken in like 4 places, I was working on going through the LBL World database and finding a bunch of levels that I liked and that would perform really well and be fun like in a dual mode. And I came up with this utility, Q3A configure, I don't know, Q3A controller. I think that's what it was. And, you know, like, utilizes aspects of XAML, and it's able to reach into the file system and get attributes of each individual map, open up each PK3 and extract the thumbnail for each particular map. Not unlike if you open the actual game and you start browsing around, you'll see the thumbnails for each individual map. And then, yeah, being able to write a configuration file to a particular CFG file and then run it. And then, you know, like I have, like, I think it's like a 3-hour long video of me just screwing around on a whole bunch of maps that I thought were really cool on LVL World. And, you know, I haven't thought to, like, do something like that for Quake Live. You know, that was before I had Quake Live. But, yeah, I think I should probably talk a little bit more about those things, because you know, there's plenty of maps out there for Quake 3 Arena that could easily be ported over to Quake Live. And, you know, I experimented with a few tools to try to do that. BSPconv, I guess, you can do that to convert the BSP file, but you have to extract the PK3 and then, or, yeah, you have to extract everything from the PK3 in order to access the BSP, and then it has to be on the file system. It can't be in a memory stream. You use that with BSPconf. If you could supply BSPconf with a memory stream, then you wouldn't need to expand the PK3 to the contents. But I don't think it has that option, which is why PowerShell can be pretty useful. You can, you know, read the content of a particular file and save it to a variable, and then hand it over to some other function that parses through it and then does something with it, and then feed it to like an executable. But the executable is going to read from an entry in the file system. Anyway, yeah, all this stuff pretty useful for coming up with some ideas, editing maps. You know, at some point I'll probably wind up converting many of the maps I'm working on to some newer title, and probably spend some time making models or some you know, when I went to ITT Technical Institute back in 2004 to 2006, I was given exposure to being able to use like a color gradient to make like the shape of like I don't know, you know how like you look at a map with lines on it to indicate the elevation and stuff? Well, it's, one of my professors or teachers at ITT Tech taught me how to do something like that with a color gradient to get like, you know, the geology, like something similar to what I just described with the lines on the map that describe the elevation. And, you know, I've also looked into some other techniques to you know, get the measurements of real life objects, like this one thing, the point cloud. I think I talked about that recently, but I didn't really talk about what that is. So it's like a laser that spins around and it gets the measurements of the objects within its perimeter, and then it projects it onto the computer. And then, you know, I think in some cases it even gets the color of stuff. You could probably use something like that to create models. You know, you probably have to reduce the complexity quite a lot in order for it to run in a game engine like Quake Live, but you know, I'm sure you could probably do something like that with you know, like a newer engine or something. You know, like a lot of people think that you have to come up with an idea from top to bottom and then like, dwell over every single little detail. But that's not always true. Sometimes you can take like something that's already done and then find a way to interpret that into an asset. A lot of developers do this, whether they're game developers or when I first started programming with PowerShell, I would see a lot of references to things like nature, like get tree. You get a tree or a path, and there's a lot of that kind of represented in the PowerShell language, like get noun verb. I don't know. I'm probably getting a little bit off topic here, but essentially what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to come up with you don't always have to come up with something entirely brand new that's never been done before in order to create like an asset for a game or whatever. What you can do is take inspiration from like existing architecture. I see this in a lot of maps for Quake Live. This one map, I think it's called, what the hell is it called? Solitude. Yeah, this dude wound up compiling his map with like 100 bounces in with Q3 map or whatever, and it does look really cool. And he said that he worked on all the textures and everything in the map. There's a lot of aspects of that map that he probably took inspiration from things in real life and then implemented them into the map. And it really pays, because that map is really, really cool. But, I think like the README for that particular map said that he worked on it for like a year or 2 years, or I don't know. That's a really long time to spend on a single map. And not saying that I won't ever do something like that, but I can't stay on the same single project for a while. I have to start working on other things and then eventually circle back around to whatever else I was working on. And I did this a lot when I was writing functions in PowerShell. I did this a lot when editing graphics back in the day. I used to, I used to make print designs. Like instead of using Photoshop or Illustrator or Microsoft Word to make a file that could be printed and distributed like a program, I would use HTML to craft out the tables and stuff. And a lot of people would be like, well, you should probably be using cascading style sheets to do stuff like that. And I was like, well, I guess in some cases you probably could use CSS to help set up the structure of a document that can be printed over and over and over, like a restaurant menu or a program for like an event, like the Great American Pet Festival. It's what I used to do for that guy. I would make an HTML file in Notepad or whatever, or use a combination of that and front page, and then I would have an HTML file that I could bring to Staples or Office Max or whatever, and then they would print out the document and it would look perfect. Stuff like that. But now I had a pretty good handle on other ways to do that, but I liked to do that manually back in the day because I thought it was rather challenging, fun, and cool. Sometimes I like to do things the hard way because I feel more of a reward for doing things the hard way. And then eventually when I stop doing things the hard way and look for the easy way to do things, then I go from like having no chance in hell at completing whatever I'm trying to do to like just about done or finished not too long afterward. Playing Dark Souls 3 taught me a lot of like trying to do things the hard way. Anyone that plays that game gets accustomed to the fact that the game is insanely difficult, but as soon as you learn the patterns of all the bosses and the enemies, then it's not that difficult at all, right? And then eventually you're able to beat all the bosses pretty easily. you learn their pattern or whatever. And that's really like the thing of it with anything that you decide to do. Once you determine that there's a pattern or a method to all the madness, you're able to take something really complex and then get it all down to like layers and stuff. It makes it a lot more manageable and possible to do. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for this particular audio recording. End log.